My name is Ezra. I'm 62 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. But I swear on my wife's grave, and believe me, that means something now. Every word of this is true. 6 months ago, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was losing the love of my life. I was wrong. The worst thing was what came after. Celeste and I were married for 38 years. 38 years of shared coffee cups, inside jokes, and the kind of love that grows deeper with every wrinkle and grey hair. She was my best friend, my partner, my everything. When the doctors told us about the cancer, we faced it together like we'd faced everything else. But cancer doesn't care about love stories. It doesn't care about 38 years of marriage, or the retirement plans we'd made, or the grandchildren we'd hoped to spoil together. Celeste died on a Tuesday. Morning in March, I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. The last thing she said to me was, "Take care of yourself, easy. Promise me you'll be okay." I promised her, even though we both knew it was a lie. The funeral was a blur. Our daughter Iris flew in from Portland. Our son Jasper drove up from Phoenix. The house filled with casseroles and condolences, but after everyone left, the silence was deafening. For 38 years, I'd never eaten dinner alone. I'd never watched TV without someone to share the jokes with. I'd never gone to bed without saying goodnight to the person lying next to me. The first few weeks were the hardest. I'd catch myself setting 2 coffee cups in the morning, or I'd hear something funny on the news and turn to tell Celeste, only to remember she wasn't there. The house felt like a museum of our life together. Every photograph, every piece of furniture, every coffee stain on the kitchen counter, a reminder of what I'd lost. Iris called every day at first, then every other day, then weekly. Jasper sent texts asking how I was doing. I appreciated their concern, but how do you tell your children that you feel like half of yourself died with their mother? How do you explain that you're not just grieving a person, but an entire way of being in the world? About a month after the funeral, I was going through Celeste's things, something I'd been putting off because it felt too final. I found her phone in the drawer of her nightstand, still plugged into the charger where she'd left it the night before she went into the hospital for the last time. The battery was dead, but when I plugged it in, it came to life with a series of notification sounds. Dozens of messages, Facebook notifications, text messages, emails. All the digital noise of a life suddenly stopped. I scrolled through them, with tears in my eyes. Friends who hadn't heard about her passing, asking how she was feeling. Automated reminders about appointments she'd never keep. Birthday notifications for people she'd never congratulate again. I should have turned the phone off. I should have cancelled her accounts, dealt with the digital aftermath of death like a responsible widower. But seeing her name on that screen, seeing the evidence that she'd existed in this digital world we'd barely understood, it was comforting somehow. So I kept the phone charged. One kept her Facebook account active. Sometimes I'd scroll through her photos, read old conversations we'd had, look at the posts she'd shared about our life together. It became a ritual. Every morning with my coffee, I'd check Celeste's phone. I'd read the messages from friends who were still sending condolences, the automated birthday reminders, the spam emails that kept coming to her account. It was morbid, maybe, but it made me feel connected to her somehow. 3 months after she died, something changed. I was having my morning coffee, scrolling through her phone as usual, when I saw something that made my blood run cold. A new message. Not a condolence from a friend or an automated notification. A personal message sent from Celeste's own Facebook account to mine. "Good morning, my love. I miss you so much." I stared at the screen for a full minute, my hands shaking. It had to be a mistake, some kind of glitch. Facebook was always having technical problems, right? Maybe it was an old message that had somehow gotten delayed, finally delivered months later. But the timestamp said it had been sent that morning. 5 minutes ago. I set the phone down and walked away. I made myself another cup of coffee, tried to rationalize what I'd seen. It was impossible. Celeste was dead. I'd watched them lower her casket into the ground. I'd thrown dirt on top of it. Dead people don't send Facebook messages. But when I came back to the phone, there was another message. "I know this must be confusing, easy, but I'm still here. I'm still with you." My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might have a heart attack. I looked around the empty kitchen, half expecting to see Celeste standing there, smiling at me like this was all some elaborate joke. But the kitchen was empty. The house was silent. And the phone in my hands was very real. I typed back with trembling fingers, "Celeste, is this really you?" The response came immediately. "Of course it's me, darling. Who else would it be?" I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those words. Part of me wanted to believe it was really her. Part of me was terrified that I was losing my mind. Grief can do strange things to people. I knew that. Maybe I was having some kind of breakdown, hallucinating messages that weren't really there. But the messages kept coming. "I know you've been sad, easy. I can see how much you're hurting. I wish I could hold you, comfort you like I used to. But I'm watching over you. I'm always watching." Over the next few days, the messages became more frequent. Celeste would send me good morning texts, just like she used to when she was alive and I was at work. She'd comment on things happening in my day, how I'd burned my toast, how I'd fallen asleep watching TV, how I'd been crying while looking through our photo albums. My name is Ezra. I'm 62 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. But I swear on my wife's grave, and believe me, that means something now. Every word of this is true. 6 months ago, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was losing the love of my life. I was wrong. The worst thing was what came after. Celeste and I were married for 38 years. 38 years of shared coffee cups, inside jokes, and the kind of love that grows deeper with every wrinkle and grey hair. She was my best friend, my partner, my everything. When the doctors told us about the cancer, we faced it together like we'd faced everything else. But cancer doesn't care about love stories. It doesn't care about 38 years of marriage, or the retirement plans we'd made, or the grandchildren we'd hoped to spoil together. Celeste died on a Tuesday. Morning in March, I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. The last thing she said to me was, "Take care of yourself, easy. Promise me you'll be okay." I promised her, even though we both knew it was a lie. The funeral was a blur. Our daughter Iris flew in from Portland. Our son Jasper drove up from Phoenix. The house filled with casseroles and condolences, but after everyone left, the silence was deafening. For 38 years, I'd never eaten dinner alone. I'd never watched TV without someone to share the jokes with. I'd never gone to bed without saying goodnight to the person lying next to me. The first few weeks were the hardest. I'd catch myself setting 2 coffee cups in the morning, or I'd hear something funny on the news and turn to tell Celeste, only to remember she wasn't there. The house felt like a museum of our life together. every photograph, every piece of furniture, every coffee stain on the kitchen counter, a reminder of what I'd lost. Iris called every day at first, then every other day, then weekly. Jasper sent texts asking how I was doing. I appreciated their concern, but how do you tell your children that you feel like half of yourself died with their mother? How do you explain that you're not just grieving a person, but an entire way of being in the world? About a month after the funeral, I was going through Celeste's things, something I'd been putting off because it felt too final. I found her phone in the drawer of her nightstand, still plugged into the charger where she'd left it the night before she went into the hospital for the last time. The battery was dead, but when I plugged it in, it came to life with a series of notification sounds. Dozens of messages, Facebook notifications, text messages, emails. The messages became more frantic. Please, easy, I'm begging you. They're hurting me here. You said you'd love me, even as a ghost. Prove it. Help me. If you really love me, you'll do this. It's the only way we can be together again. I went to the bank. I withdrew the money. I felt like I was sleepwalking, moving through a dream where nothing made sense, but I had to keep going anyway. A man named Marcus called me. Somehow he had my number and gave me instructions on where to meet him. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his 30s, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He told me he was a spiritual medium, that he'd been contacted by Celeste's spirit. She was trapped, he explained, caught between worlds, and she needed help crossing over. She loves you very much, Marcus said, taking the envelope of cash. She talks about you constantly, but there are dark forces trying to keep her trapped. This money will help me perform the ritual she needs. It sounded crazy, but what about any of this wasn't crazy? My dead wife was sending me Facebook messages. Normal rules didn't seem to apply anymore, but $5,000 wasn't enough. A few days later, Celeste messaged me again. Thank you for helping, my love. But Marcus says we need more. The dark spirits are stronger than he thought. I need another $8,000. Easy. I know it's a lot, but it's the only way. Please don't abandon me now. I'm so close to being free. I took out a loan against the house. I met Marcus again, handed over more money. He assured me that this would be enough, that Celeste would soon be at peace. But the messages didn't stop. They became more demanding, more manipulative. You're not doing enough, easy. If you really loved me, you'd do anything to help me. I see you hesitating. Do I not matter to you anymore? Maybe I was wrong about our love. Maybe you're relieved I'm dead. These messages hurt worse than anything. They were cruel in a way that Celeste had never been. But grief and desperation make you doubt everything, even your own memories of the person you loved most. I gave Marcus another $10,000, then another $15,000. I sold Celeste's jewelry, her car, anything of value I could find. Each time, Marcus promised it would be the last time, that Celeste was almost free. But she never was. The messages kept coming, always asking for more money, always threatening that if I didn't help, she'd be lost forever. I was running out of money, running out of things to sell. I was considering taking out a second mortgage on the house when something happened that changed everything. I was at the grocery store, the same one where Celeste and I had shopped together for decades, when I ran into her friend, Patricia. We'd known Patricia for years. She and Celeste had been in book club together, had gone on girls' trips, had shared countless lunches and phone calls. Ezra, Patricia said, giving me a hug. How are you holding up, honey? Managing. I said, not wanting to get into the details of my strange situation. "I've been meaning to ask you," Patricia said. "What happened to Celeste's Facebook account? I keep seeing these weird posts from her, and it's honestly kind of upsetting. I know people sometimes keep accounts active as memorials, but these posts don't sound like her at all." My blood went cold. "What posts? You haven't seen them?" "She's been posting almost daily. Strange stuff about being trapped, asking for help. And the language. Celeste never talked like that. It's almost like someone else is writing them." Patricia showed me her phone. There, on Celeste's Facebook page, were dozens of posts I'd never seen. Public posts, visible to all her friends, written in a voice that was nothing like my wife's. "Help me," one post read. "I'm trapped and no one will listen. The darkness is closing in. I need money to escape. My husband doesn't love me enough to save me." I felt sick. These posts were public. All of Celeste's friends, our neighbors, people from our church, they were all seeing this. They probably thought I'd lost my mind, that I was somehow behind. These disturbing messages, but more importantly, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. If Celeste was really communicating with me from beyond the grave, why would she need money? What use would a spirit have for cash? And why would she be posting publicly on Facebook instead of just sending me private messages? "Patricia," I said, my voice shaking, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Have you ever heard of spirits or ghosts communicating through social media?" Patricia looked at me with concern. "Ezra, honey, ghosts don't use Facebook. Someone is using Celeste's account. Someone who shouldn't have access to it." That night, I called the police. I explained the situation, that someone had gained access to my deceased wife's social media accounts and was using them to scam me. The officer I spoke with was kind, but not particularly surprised. "This happens more often than you'd think," he said. "Scammers target grieving spouses, especially older ones. They hack into the deceased person's accounts or create fake profiles. They use personal information from social media posts to make their messages seem authentic." "But how did they know so much about our private life?" I asked. "You'd be surprised how much personal information people share online without realizing it. Photos, check-ins, anniversary posts, casual comments, scammers piece it all together to create a convincing narrative." The officer helped me report the fraud to Facebook and to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. We traced the messages back to an IP address in another country. The Marcus I'd been giving money to was probably just a local accomplice, collecting cash that was then transferred overseas. I'd lost over $40,000 to someone pretending to be my dead wife. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the realization that I'd been betrayed in the most intimate way possible. Someone had taken my grief, my love, my desperate hope that death wasn't the end, and they'd weaponized it against me. They'd studied my wife's social media presence, learned our history, our inside jokes, our private moments that we'd shared online without thinking about who might be watching. They'd used that information to create a convincing imitation of the woman I loved, then used that imitation to manipulate me when I was at my most vulnerable. The messages stopped after I reported the fraud. Celeste's Facebook account was finally deactivated. The phone that had been my connection to what I thought was her spirit went silent, but the damage was done. I'd not only lost my wife, I'd lost my faith in the possibility of any connection beyond death. I'd lost my savings. I'd lost my dignity. And worst of all, I'd lost the pure, untainted memories of Celeste that had been my only comfort in grief. Now, when I remembered our wedding night conversation about loving each other even as ghosts, it was tainted by the memory of how someone had used those words to manipulate me. When I thought about our first anniversary disaster, I wondered who else might know that story. Who else might use it against me someday? The scammer had stolen more than my money. They'd stolen my ability to trust my own memories, my own feelings, my own judgment. Iris and Jasper were devastated when I finally told them what had happened. They blamed themselves for not checking on me more often, for not noticing the signs that I was being manipulated. But how could they have known? I'd been so convinced that I was communicating with their mother that I'd hidden it from them. Afraid they'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe grief had made me so desperate for connection that I'd ignored all the obvious signs that this was a scam. Maybe I'd wanted so badly to believe that death wasn't the end that I'd convinced myself the impossible was possible. The FBI agent who handled my case told me I wasn't alone. Romance scams targeting widows and widowers are increasingly common, she said. The scammers are getting more sophisticated, using AI and social media data to create convincing personas. You're not the first person to fall for this, and unfortunately, you won't be the last. But knowing I wasn't alone didn't make the shame any less crushing. I'd been a successful businessman, a rational person who'd navigated decades of adult life without being taken advantage of. How had I become so gullible, so desperate, so easily manipulated? The answer, I realized, was grief. Grief doesn't just make you sad, it makes you vulnerable in ways you never imagined. It strips away your defenses, your skepticism, your ability to think clearly. When you're drowning in loss, any lifeline looks real, even if it's just an illusion. I'm telling you this story not just as a warning, though I hope it serves as one. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something that took me 62 years and a devastating scam to learn. The dead don't send text messages. They don't post on Facebook. They don't ask for money or demand proof of your love. But their memory lives on in the people who knew them, in the stories we tell about them, in the love we carry forward. That's the real afterlife, not some digital ghost haunting social media, but the way the people we've lost continue to shape us, guide us, inspire us to be better. The scammer who pretended to be Celeste thought they were stealing from a lonely old man, but what they really stole was something much more precious: my faith in the possibility of connection beyond death, my trust in my own judgment, my ability to grieve purely without suspicion and doubt. If you're reading this and you've lost someone you love, please be careful. Your grief makes you a target. Your love makes you vulnerable. And there are people out there who will exploit that vulnerability without a second thought. The real Celeste, my Celeste, would never have asked me for money. She would never have manipulated my emotions or made demands on my love. She would have wanted me to heal, to find peace, to move forward with my life while carrying her memory in my heart. That's what I'm trying to do now. It's harder than it should be, because the scam has complicated my grief in ways I'm still trying to understand. But I'm learning to trust my real memories of Celeste again, to separate the woman I loved from the digital phantom that someone created to deceive me. I'm also learning to be more connected to the living. Iris calls me every day now, and I actually answer. Jasper visits more often. I've joined a grief support group where I can talk to other people who understand loss without Fear that they're trying to scam me. The dead don't send text messages, but the living do, and maybe that's enough. Maybe the love and connection I was desperately seeking in messages from beyond was available to me all along in the relationships I still have. The people who are still here, still breathing, still capable of real love and real comfort. If someone claiming to be your deceased loved one contacts you online, please remember my story. Remember that love doesn't ask for money, that the dead don't need cash, that grief makes us vulnerable to people who would exploit our deepest pain for profit. Your loved one's real message to you isn't coming through Facebook or text messages. It's in your heart, in your memories, in the way they shaped you and the love they left behind. That's the only afterlife message you can trust, the one that lives inside you, not the one that appears on a screen asking for your bank account. Trust that message. Trust your memories. And please, please, be careful who you trust with your grief. The dead don't text, but scammers do, and they're counting on your love to make you forget the difference.